I found out my mom spent my college fund the same day I got accepted into my dream university. I was 18. I thought my future was secure. I thought my parents had protected me. I was wrong. For as long as I could remember, my mother talked about the fund. She said it like it was sacred. "Don't worry," she'd tell me whenever I stressed about grades. "Your college is covered. We've been saving since you were a baby." That promise shaped my entire childhood. We weren't rich, not even close. We lived in a modest house in Ohio. My dad worked long shifts at a manufacturing plant. My mom stayed home for most of my childhood, then picked up part-time work once I hit middle school. Money was always tight, but the one thing I never doubted was my education, because she reminded me constantly. Every time I skipped a school trip to save money, every time I chose community sports over expensive travel leagues, every time I turned down a summer camp I really wanted to attend. "We're sacrificing now," she'd say, "so you won't struggle later." I believed her. Looking back, I can see the early cracks, the small red flags. But when you're raised to trust your parents blindly, you don't question them. You don't imagine your own mother would become the villain in a betrayal family story. The day the acceptance email arrived, I screamed. Full scholarship? No, but a partial one, enough to make it possible. All I needed was access to the savings account that had been growing for 18 years. I printed the email, I ran downstairs, my hands were shaking, but from excitement. My mom was at the kitchen table scrolling through her phone. "I got in," I said, breathless. She smiled. It didn't reach her eyes. "That's great, honey." I sat across from her. "So, can we talk about the account? I need to send in the deposit by next month." There was a pause. A long one. Something shifted in the air. She put her phone down slowly, folded her hands, looked at me in a way that suddenly made me feel 5 years old again. "We need to have a conversation," she said. I remember my stomach dropping. Not because I understood yet, but because instinct told me something was wrong. That conversation was the beginning of my toxic family money story. It was the moment I learned that sometimes parents stole my savings without ever calling it theft. And when a mom spent my college fund, she doesn't just take money. She takes trust, security, future. But I didn't know that yet. At 18, sitting at that kitchen table, I still thought this was just a misunderstanding. I still thought my mother would explain everything. I still thought she loved me enough not to break me. I had no idea that this was only the first chapter of a revenge success story I never asked to write. And if I'm being honest, that day didn't just change my finances, it changed who I was forever. My mom didn't look nervous. She looked rehearsed. That was the first thing that scared me. She cleared her throat and gave me a tight smile. "Sweetheart, things changed." I felt my pulse in my ears. "What do you mean?" She sighed, dramatic, controlled. "We had to use some of the money." Some. That word hung in the air like it was harmless. "How much is left?" I asked. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she started explaining, talking in circles, about hard years, about unexpected expenses, about how family comes first. I sat there trying to piece it together. "Mom," I said quietly, "how much is left?" Her eyes hardened slightly. "There isn't a fund anymore." I blinked, like my brain needed a second to translate the sentence. "What do you mean, there isn't?" She leaned back in her chair. "We needed it." Needed it. That was when the room started to feel smaller. Over the next 30 minutes, the truth came out in fragments. The car upgrade 2 years ago, the kitchen renovation, a small investment opportunity that didn't work out, credit card debt she didn't want Dad to stress about. Bit by bit, the story unfolded. My mom spent my college fund. All of it. Every dollar my grandparents contributed, every birthday check I was told was being deposited for your future, every tax return they bragged about saving for me. Gone. And somehow she was speaking like this was a shared sacrifice. "You'll understand when you're older," she said. "Families support each other." I felt heat crawl up my neck. Support, I whispered. It was my money. She didn't like that. Her expression shifted instantly. Excuse me? It was for my education. She crossed her arms. So now you're accusing us of stealing from you? There it was, the pivot. Gaslighting so smooth, I almost questioned myself. Maybe I was being dramatic. Maybe this wasn't parents stole my savings. Maybe this was just life. But something deep in my chest knew better. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a betrayal family story unfolding in real time. Dad came home halfway through the argument. He looked exhausted, confused, and when he realized what we were discussing, he didn't explode. He just looked defeated. I told her not to tell you yet, he muttered. Not to tell me yet. So they both knew. How long? I asked. Silence. How long has the account been empty? Dad rubbed his forehead. About 3 years. 3 years. That meant when I was studying for SATs, when I was working part-time to save extra spending money, when I turned down campus visits because we need to be responsible. They already knew there was nothing there. My toxic family money story didn't start that day. It had been building quietly for years. And the worst part? They still expected gratitude. You can take out loans like everyone else, my mom said sharply. It builds character. Character. I walked upstairs without another word, closed my bedroom door, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like their daughter. I felt like an outsider in my own home. That night, staring at the ceiling, I realized a devastating thing. When a mom spent my college fund, it wasn't just about tuition. It was about control, and control was something she had no intention of giving up. The next few days felt surreal. My mom acted normal, too normal. She asked what I wanted for dinner, reminded me to bring a sweater if I went out, told relatives on the phone how proud she was that I got accepted. It was like the conversation never happened. Like my mom spent my college fund was just a tiny footnote in our family history. I started asking questions. Not emotionally, not angrily, just logically. Can I see the statements from the account? I asked one evening. Her fork paused mid-air. Why? I just want to understand where it went. She sighed heavily as if I had insulted her. You don't trust me? There it was again, that subtle shift, the manipulation that made me feel like the villain in my own betrayal family story. I just want transparency, I said carefully. Dad stared at his plate. My mom's voice turned cold. You're being ungrateful. Ungrateful? For what? For being told my future was secure while it was quietly being drained? For believing my parents when they said they were protecting me? That was the moment something snapped. Not loudly, not dramatically, but permanently. You told me my whole life that account was mine, I said. You told me not to worry. You told me you were saving it for me. We did what was best for the family, she shot back. No, I said quietly. You did what was best for you. The room went silent. Dad finally spoke. It wasn't like that. Then what was it like? I asked. He didn't answer, because the truth was obvious. Parents stole my savings, and they wrapped it in the language of love. I asked one final question. Did you ever plan on telling me before I got accepted? Silence again. That was my breaking point. It wasn't the missing money. It wasn't even the debt I now faced. It was the realization that they would have let me walk into adulthood believing a lie. I went upstairs, pulled out the folder where I kept every scholarship application, every financial aid form, every acceptance letter. I sat on my bed and allowed myself to feel it fully. The grief, the humiliation, the fear. My toxic family money story had officially become my reality. I would need loans. I would need to work. I would start adulthood already behind. And my mom, she still believed she was right. That night, she knocked on my door. "I hope you're not going to hold this against us," she said softly. Hold it against them? As if this was a misunderstanding about curfew. As if my entire financial foundation hadn't just evaporated. I looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time, I didn't see a protector. I saw someone who believed she was entitled to my future. "I won't hold it against you," I said calmly, and in that moment, I meant it. Not because I forgave her, but because I realized something far more powerful. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to beg. I wasn't going to chase validation from people who had already decided I was collateral damage. I was going to adapt, and I was going to remember. Because every revenge success story doesn't start with anger. Sometimes it starts with silence. The house felt different after that. Not explosive, not openly hostile, just fragile. My mom started hovering more. She'd knock before entering my room now. She'd ask about my backup school plans. She'd casually mention local colleges, like lowering my expectations was the obvious solution. "You don't have to go away," she said one afternoon while folding laundry. "Community college is smart, cheap, sensible." Sensible. That word again. I nodded. I stopped arguing. That was the shift she didn't expect. I didn't bring up that my mom spent my college fund anymore. I didn't demand statements. I didn't confront her about how parents stole my savings and reframed it as sacrifice. Instead, I started planning, quietly. I met with my school counselor without telling her. I asked about emergency grants. I researched federal loans. I applied for every scholarship I could find, even the tiny $500 local Kiwanis ones. Every night, after dinner, I sat at my desk and filled out forms. She thought I was overreacting at first. Then she thought I was pouting. Eventually, she thought I'd moved on. That was her mistake. The tension simmered in small moments. When relatives congratulated her for raising such a responsible daughter. When she posted online about sending my baby off to college soon. When she told neighbors how hard they'd worked to save for me. I wanted to scream, but I didn't, because I realized something important. In every toxic family money story, the person who stays calm gains power. If I exploded, she'd paint me as unstable. If I accused her publicly, I'd look bitter. So I chose something harder. I chose control. One evening, I overheard her on the phone with her sister. "She's acting like we ruined her life," my mom complained. "It wasn't even that much money." Not that much money. It had been nearly $42,000. I knew because I'd found an old statement tucked inside a filing cabinet while she was out grocery shopping. That's when I saw it clearly. Withdrawals in chunks. $5,000 here, $10,000 there, over 3 years. Kitchen remodel, new SUV down payment, personal transfer. I took photos of everything. Not to use immediately, just to have. Proof matters in a betrayal family story, even if you never show it. The real breaking shift came when Dad approached me privately. "She didn't mean to hurt you," he said quietly in the garage one night. "But she did," I replied. He nodded. For the first time, I saw guilt in him. Not defense, just regret. That's when I understood something else. My mom wasn't panicking because she felt bad. She was panicking because she felt exposed, because I wasn't reacting emotionally anymore. I was becoming independent, and control slips when independence grows. The acceptance deadline was approaching. I secured loans. I secured 2 additional scholarships. I lined up a campus job before even moving in. And when I told her I was still going, still leaving, her smile faltered. "You're really going to take on that much debt?" "Yes." "You'll struggle." "I know." She studied me carefully, as if waiting for me to beg. I didn't, because this wasn't just about money anymore. This was about who I would become, and every revenge success story begins when you stop asking permission to survive. I left for college 3 weeks later, with 2 suitcases, a loan packet, and a memory I would never forget. My mom spent my college fund, but she didn't get to spend my future. Like a calculation, every textbook purchase felt like a gamble. While other freshmen decorated their dorms and planned weekend trips, I was checking my bank balance at midnight. Because when your mom spent my college fund, adulthood doesn't start gently. It starts with survival. I worked 20 hours a week at the campus library. Then I picked up tutoring sessions on weekends. By sophomore year, I had a paid internship. By junior year, I was leading a research team. I didn't post about it. I didn't brag. But I built momentum. That's the thing about a revenge success story. It doesn't look like revenge at first. It looks like discipline. Meanwhile, back home, things weren't as stable as my mom pretended. The SUV she'd upgraded to? Higher payments than she admitted. The kitchen renovation? Still unfinished details they couldn't afford to complete. Dad's hours at the plant were reduced. Credit card balances crept higher. And I only knew because Dad started calling me, not for money, for advice. It happened slowly. He'd ask what I was studying, what internships paid, how budgeting apps worked. There was humility in his voice I'd never heard before. One night during my junior year, he said something that stayed with me. "I wish we'd handled things differently." I didn't ask him to clarify. We both knew what he meant. My toxic family money story wasn't just about money anymore. It was about consequences unfolding quietly. Senior year, I landed a job offer 6 months before graduation. A competitive salary, relocation covered, signing bonus. I remember sitting in my dorm room staring at the email, hands shaking, just like the day I got accepted. But this time, the shaking wasn't fear, it was power. I didn't call my mom first. I called Dad. He cried, actually cried. "She's going to be so proud," he said. I didn't answer that, because pride had never been the issue. Control had. After graduation, I moved across the country. New city, new apartment, new life. The distance helped. Phone calls became shorter, visits became rare. But every conversation with my mom had a subtle shift. She asked about my salary, about my rent, about how much I was saving. There was curiosity there, but also something else. Need. About a year into my new job, she called unexpectedly. Her voice was softer than usual. "How are you doing financially?" she asked. "Fine," I said. "That's good, that's really good." Pause. Then, "We're going through a bit of a rough patch." There it was, the beginning of the full circle. Parents stole my savings once. Now the financial instability they created was circling back. She didn't ask for help directly that night, but she planted the seed, and for the first time I felt it. Not anger, not bitterness. Clarity. Because the difference between us now was simple. When my mom spent my college fund, I had no power. Now I had choices, and she knew it. That was when my silent revenge truly began. Not with shouting, not with exposure, but with patience. Because sometimes karma doesn't strike all at once. Sometimes it waits, and I was very, very patient. The official request came 3 months later. Not dramatic, not desperate, calculated. My mom called on a Sunday afternoon. Her voice was shaky in a way that sounded practiced. "We're going through a bit of a rough patch," she said. I didn't rush to fill the silence. Dad had already hinted at refinancing problems, credit cards maxed, the SUV worth less than what they owed. But hearing it from her felt different. "How bad?" I asked calmly. She exhaled slowly. "We might lose the house." There it was. The house I grew up in, the kitchen renovated with my money, the driveway that once held the upgraded car bought the same year my college account hit zero. For a split second, my chest tightened, not from guilt, from memory. Because this was the same woman who told me taking loans would build character. Now she was the one drowning in debt. I didn't want to ask, but we're doing so well, we just need a temporary loan. Loan. The word almost made me smile. When my mom spent my college fund, there was no loan agreement, no repayment plan, no signed document, just expectation. Just like the fund was supposed to be temporary. I leaned back in my apartment chair and let the silence stretch. This was the pivot point in my revenge success story. The easy path would have been explosive. To say, "You mean like the $42,000 you'll pay me back? You mean like when parents stole my savings and called it family support?" But real power isn't loud. It's controlled. "I'd need to look at everything," I said evenly. "Everything?" she asked. "Mortgage statements, credit card balances, income, a repayment plan." The silence on her end was thick. "You don't trust us?" she asked softly. There it was again, the same line from years ago, the same attempt to turn accountability into betrayal. I didn't flinch this time. "This is what banks require," I replied. "If you want a loan, that's standard." Her tone shifted. Slight irritation, slight panic. "We're your parents." "Yes, and I'm your daughter." Another long pause. This wasn't just about money anymore. This was about hierarchy flipping. In every toxic family money story, there's a moment when the child stops being financially vulnerable. This was mine. She tried a different tactic. "We sacrificed so much for you." I almost laughed, because that was the narrative she'd told herself. But I didn't challenge it. Instead, I asked one simple question. "If I help, will you acknowledge what happened with the college fund?" Dead silence. The air practically crackled through the phone. "That was years ago," she said carefully. "It still matters." Her voice hardened. "So this is revenge?" I let that word sit between us. No, this wasn't revenge in the explosive sense. This wasn't humiliation or public exposure. This was structure, accountability, boundaries. It was the natural evolution of a betrayal family story reaching its consequence. "If I help," I repeated, "we're doing it legally, written agreement, clear repayment, and I want a full conversation about the past." She didn't answer right away, because for the first time in her life, she wasn't holding the leverage. I was. And when someone who once controlled the narrative realizes they no longer do, that's when karma begins to breathe. Again, different tone, less confidence. "We've decided to figure it out ourselves," she said quickly. Of course they had, because sending the documents would mean transparency, and transparency would mean admitting that my mom spent my college fund wasn't a misunderstanding, it was a choice. I didn't argue. "I hope it works out," I replied, and I meant it. But karma doesn't disappear just because you refuse to acknowledge it. 2 months later, Dad called. This time, there was no performance in his voice. "She maxed out another card," he said quietly. "We're behind on 2 payments." I closed my eyes. "Did she ever tell you exactly how much was in my account?" I asked. "Yes," he said. "She didn't send the documents. Not that week, not the next. Instead, she called again. Different tone, less confidence. We've decided to figure it out ourselves," she said quickly. Of course they had, because sending the documents would mean transparency, and transparency would mean admitting that my mom spent my college fund wasn't a misunderstanding, it was a choice. I didn't argue. "I hope it works out," I replied, and I meant it. But karma doesn't disappear just because you refuse to acknowledge it. 2 months later, Dad called. This time, there was no performance in his voice. "She maxed out another card," he said quietly. "We're behind on 2 payments." I closed my eyes. "Did she ever tell you exactly how much was in my account?" I asked. "Yes," he said. $42,000. Hearing him say the number out loud felt surreal. For years, it had floated around like a rumor in my own mind. Now, it was real. "I told her we should have replaced it," he continued. "We kept saying we would." But they didn't, and now the house was officially in pre-foreclosure. The kitchen that symbolized their upgrade became a reminder. The SUV got repossessed quietly one morning. Neighbors noticed. Whispers started. Suddenly, the image she'd curated for years cracked. And here's the part that makes this a real revenge success story. I didn't lift a finger to cause any of it. I didn't expose her. I didn't post screenshots. I didn't humiliate her publicly for how parents stole my savings and rewrote the story. I simply refused to rescue her from the consequences. One evening, she called again, but this time there was no pride left. "I'm sorry," she said. Just that. No justification, no family comes first, no gaslighting about how I was ungrateful. Silence followed. "I shouldn't have used the money," she continued. "I kept thinking we'd replace it before you needed it, and then it got out of control." For the first time, she sounded human, not defensive, not manipulative, just tired. "I was embarrassed," she admitted, "so I doubled down." There it was, shame disguised as authority, control disguised as sacrifice, the core of every toxic family money story. I didn't rush to comfort her, but I didn't attack either. "I needed you to admit that," I said quietly. "I know." The house eventually sold, not at a profit. They downsized to a small rental. Dad picked up extra work. And something unexpected happened. The power dynamic equalized. She stopped asking about my salary, stopped probing about savings, stopped assuming access to my resources, because she understood now. When my mom spent my college fund, she thought she was protecting her comfort. Instead, she set the stage for her own loss of control. Karma didn't scream. It didn't explode. It simply allowed reality to unfold without interference. And that was enough. People expect revenge to feel electric, triumphant, victorious, loud. It wasn't. When everything settled, the house sold, the downsizing complete, the apologies spoken, I didn't feel powerful. I felt steady. For years, my toxic family money story defined me. The girl whose mom spent my college fund, the daughter who discovered her parents stole my savings and had to claw her way forward alone. But somewhere between working double shifts in college and negotiating boundaries as an adult, I stopped being the victim, not because the past changed, but because I did. My relationship with my mom never went back to what it was. It became realistic. We talk, we meet for coffee when I visit. There are no more conversations about money unless I initiate them. And if she hints, even subtly, I redirect immediately. Boundaries aren't loud. they are consistent. The biggest shift wasn't financial, it was emotional. I stopped chasing validation from someone who once saw my future as flexible. I stopped trying to prove I was grateful enough. I stopped shrinking to make her comfortable. In every betrayal family story, there's a moment where you decide who you are without the narrative they gave you. For me, that moment wasn't when I confronted her. It wasn't when I demanded documents. It wasn't even when she apologized. It was the day I realized I could help and chose not to unless it respected me. That's the core of a revenge success story. Not destruction, not humiliation, self-respect. People sometimes ask if I regret not saving the house, if I feel guilty watching my parents struggle. Here's the truth. I already paid once. With debt, with stress, with nights of panic at 19 years old calculating interest rates. When my mom spent my college fund, she made a financial decision. When I refused to fix her mistakes without accountability, I made a personal one. There's a difference. Today, I own my apartment. I have savings, an emergency fund, investments, things no one else has access to. Not because I'm paranoid, but because I learned the hard way that security isn't what someone promises you, it's what you build yourself. My parents stole my savings once, but they didn't steal my discipline. They didn't steal my work ethic. They didn't steal my future. And that's why this toxic family money story didn't end in bitterness. It ended in clarity. If you've ever been in a situation where someone you trusted used your resources, your credit, your safety, and called it love, I want you to know something. You're not selfish for demanding accountability. You're not cruel for protecting what's yours. And you're not wrong for remembering. Because sometimes the most powerful revenge success story isn't about getting even, it's about getting free. So tell me, if you were in my position, would you have helped them? Or would you have walked away too?